The desert didn't scream, it simmered. A searing 112 degrees. Not a breeze, not a shadow. Just endless, shimmering asphalt between Nevada and California. No signs. No gas station. No life. And yet, something moved. David Cole was driving alone, windows up, AC on full blast, another call from his board blinking unanswered on the dash. His thoughts were far million-dollar acquisitions, meaningless meetings, the usual noise. Until his foot slammed the brake. He saw them. A barefoot boy, no older than 12, stumbles along the edge of the burning road. His arms, too thin, too small, were wrapped around 3 babies. Silent. Limp. Their heads rested against his shoulders like rag dolls, skin flushed from the sun. None of them cried. And that silence hit David harder than any sound ever could. He threw the door open. Heat punched his chest. But the boy didn't stop. Didn't flinch. Just kept walking, step after bloody step, like he couldn't afford to fall. Like falling meant dying. David ran toward him. "Hey! Kid!" No answer. The boy's lips were cracked, ice glassy, hair stiff with dust and sweat. His shirt hung off one shoulder, damp with baby spit and blood. One child's hand twitched faintly. Another's breathing was shallow, barely there. "Let me help you," David whispered, crouching. But the boy finally collapsed. His knees gave in like paper. He fell to the side, cradling the babies as if cushioning their fall was more important than saving his own life. David caught him just in time. The boy gasped, barely audible. Walked, all day, had to, give them, a chance. Then nothing. His eyes fluttered shut. David's heart thundered. He hadn't felt fear, not real, human fear, in years. But now, it took over. He reached for his bottle of water, uncapped it, and dribbled drops onto the boy's cracked lips and then the baby's tongues. One of them whimpered faintly. Relief, fragile as glass, washed over David. But one baby wasn't breathing. Panic surged. He placed her gently on the sand, tilted her head, and began CPR, compressions, mouth to mouth, again and again. His hands shook. His eyes blurred. "Breathe, baby, come on." Still nothing. He tried again. And again. Then a soft cough. A weak cry. She was back. David exhaled, chest trembling. He gathered all 4 children into his arms, their small bodies far too light, and placed them in his car. The leather seats scorched his skin, but he didn't care. He turned the AC full blast, checked pulses, laid wet cloths on their foreheads. No signal. No GPS. Just empty highway. He drove. Fast. 30 minutes of nothing but sand and desperation until finally an old warehouse with a cracked sign and a rusted water tank. He stopped, banged the door, broke inside. A landline. A miracle. 911, what's your emergency? He gave the location. The children's condition. He didn't have answers. Just fear. The ambulance came. Flashing lights cut through the dust. The children were taken. David followed in silence. At the hospital, chaos blurred into sterile lights, gloved hands, rushing doctors. They were alive. Dehydrated. Burned. But alive. The boy's name? Ian. The babies? Unknown. Police arrived. They had found a body. A woman. In a nearby abandoned trailer. Her hand clutched a crumpled note. Please take care of them. I'll try, but I don't know if I'll make it back. That was all. David stood outside the glass window of the pediatric ICU, watching Ian sleep beside the incubators. 3 babies, 2 boys, 1 girl, hooked to IVs, monitors blinking like silent heartbeats. Something cracked inside him. He had once had a son too, Liam. But he wasn't here anymore. A lake. A phone call. A missed scream. A silence that never stopped echoing. David had never forgiven himself. And now, here was this boy, this stranger, who had crossed miles of fire just to keep his siblings alive. No shoes. No food. No backup. Just love. David sat down in the hallway, elbows on knees. He didn't know what he was supposed to do next. But he knew this much. He couldn't walk away. Not this time. Not again. Mr. Cole, we appreciate your concern, the nurse said gently, her eyes kind but professional, but you're not family. David stood just outside the ICU, Ian's small frame barely visible under the thin hospital blanket. The babies rested in their separate cribs, wrapped in soft cotton, but it was the kind of softness that couldn't reach trauma this deep. He nodded slowly. Not family. He wasn't even a friend. Just a stranger who happened to drive by. But something in that phrase felt heavier than it should have. Not family. As if love only counted when it came with paperwork. The next few days moved in slow, sterile waves. Police interviews. Medical forms. Questions David couldn't answer. No, I don't know their last name. No, I'm not a relative. Yes, I found them on the highway. Yes, I revived one of the infants with CPR. Still, every time someone spoke, he looked past them toward the boy who hadn't said a single word since collapsing. Ian was awake now. Alert. But distant. The kind of silence that builds walls. Every time David tried to speak, Ian turned his head toward the window, eyes locked on something beyond what any adult could see. The social worker arrived next. Marcus Blake. Mid-40s, wiry frame, worn suit, and eyes that carried too many goodbyes. We have a process, Marcus said, tapping a clipboard. Emergency foster care. Possible kinship placement. But the state will take over. David nodded, but something in him clenched. And what if the state doesn't understand what this kid's been through, he asked. Marcus paused. Do you? David had no good answer. The hospital psychologist suggested giving Ian space. He's experienced trauma we don't fully know yet. Right now, safety and silence are how he survives. So David showed up. Every morning. He'd bring coffee for the nurses and coloring books for the babies. He'd sit by Ian's bed, saying nothing, just folding paper cranes from napkins and leaving them by the window. He didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed. One afternoon, the therapist arrived, Dr. Evelyn Shaw. Soft voice, firm hands. She observed quietly and said very little. After her second visit, she approached David outside the ward. You're not trying to force a connection, she said. That's rare. Keep doing that. He wasn't sure what he was doing at all. He just couldn't walk away. Late that night, David lingered longer than usual. The babies had been fed. The lights were dim. Ian lay still, pretending to sleep. David whispered into the dark, unsure if he was even heard. My son's name was Liam. He was 5. I wasn't there when he drowned. I was on a call. A business call. I heard the voicemail after he was already gone. Silence. David exhaled. You remind me of him. Not because you're the same, but because he would have wanted me to help someone like you. The room stayed still. But then barely audible Ian's voice cracked through the dark. Do they have names? David's breath caught. I don't know, he whispered. Do you want to name them? A pause. Then a soft, single nod in the dark. Hope, quiet and aching, slipped into the room. The next day, Ian sat up slowly, body still weak but gaze more present. He pointed to the smallest baby, the girl. Safa, he said. The second, a boy with bright eyes, Noah. And the third, round cheeks, restless hands, Kian. The names weren't just names. They were anchors. Ian fed them when the nurses allowed. He helped change diapers. He hummed lullabies no one taught him. David didn't interfere. He just stood nearby, learning more from the child than any adult ever taught him. But the world outside didn't pause. Foster placement papers were underway. Ian and the babies would be split if no relative stepped forward. Marcus pulled David aside. If you're serious about helping, he said, you'll need temporary custody approved. It's a process. Background checks. Home visits. You have a clean record, but why you? David looked at the glass. At Ian's hands holding a bottle for baby Noah. Because they already chose me, he said softly. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. I'll help you try. That night, David drove back to a different house than the one he'd always returned to. Not his mansion. Not the one filled with glass and silence. He drove to a small, quiet rental on a tree-lined street. He stood in front of the door. Blue. He hadn't realized it until now. A blue door. Like in Ian's drawings. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe healing had to look like home first. The door was old. Weather-worn, chipped at the edges, but painted a vibrant blue too bright for the sleepy neighborhood. David ran his fingers across the wood. Blue. Like the door in Ian's notebook. The one he'd drawn with careful lines, over and over again in the hospital. Sometimes closed. Sometimes open. Sometimes with 4 stick figures standing outside, all smiling. David hadn't asked about it. Not yet. But he'd felt it. This door mattered. When the judge approved temporary custody, David didn't celebrate. He just sat in the courthouse parking lot in silence, fingers locked around the paperwork, heart thudding like he was standing on a cliff edge with no harness. He was scared. Not of the system, but of failing again. He returned to the hospital the next morning with one sentence. You're coming home. Ian didn't smile. He didn't cry either. He just asked quietly, all of us? All of you, David promised. The car ride was quiet, the babies gurgling softly in the back. Ian sat in the passenger seat, clutching a worn backpack. His eyes scanned the road like he didn't trust peace yet. When they pulled up to the house, Ian looked at the blue door. Then at David. "You painted it?" David shook his head. "It was always blue." For the first time, something like belief flickered in Ian's eyes. Inside, the house wasn't perfect. Furniture from Craigslist. A fridge with magnets already peeling. Blank walls. Quiet rooms. But it was warm. Real. David had spent the nights leading up to this moment assembling cribs, stacking diapers, labeling drawers with shaky handwriting, Kian's onesies, Safa's bottles, Noah's toys. He even learned to swaddle. Poorly. But Ian noticed. He noticed everything. That night, as David rocked Kian to sleep and hummed an off-key lullaby, Ian stood at the doorway, arms folded. "You're bad at that," he said. David smiled. "I know. You're doing it anyway." David looked at him. "That's what dads are supposed to do, right?" Ian didn't answer. But he didn't leave, either. Later, David found a folded page on his pillow. A stick figure drawing. 4 people. Standing outside a blue door. The smallest one now had a dog. The tallest one had a coffee mug. Underneath, Ian had scribbled something faint. "Still learning is better than not trying." David stared at it for a long time. Something shifted. Over the next few weeks, the routine grew real. Diaper explosions. Sleepless nights. Laughter echoing through the kitchen. Safa giggled every time David sneezed. Noah tried to eat the remote. Kian, the quietest of the 3, liked falling asleep on Ian's chest, hand gripping his shirt like a lifeline. And Ian? He started humming again. Drawing again. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it made David forget everything he had ever lost. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the sky, David found Ian sitting on the windowsill, knees pulled to his chest. He sat beside him. "They used to get scared of storms," Ian said softly. David waited. Ian continued. "Mom would sing them this silly song. About a sun hiding behind clouds, playing peekaboo." He paused. "After she died. I told them the sun was following us. I didn't want them to think she was gone forever." David swallowed the lump in his throat. "That's not silly. That's love." Ian turned to him, eyes raw. "Do you think I did enough?" "I tried. I walked. I carried them. I didn't know if we'd make it." David's voice broke. "You did more than most grown men ever could. You didn't just survive. You saved them." Ian blinked hard. "But I didn't save her." The silence that followed was heavy but honest. David didn't offer hollow words. Instead, he gently placed his hand on Ian's shoulder. "Neither did I," he said. Ian looked up. David continued, "I lost Liam because I wasn't there. I was chasing a deal. I told myself I'd make it up to him later. But there was no later." The rain hit the glass like soft apologies. "You think that makes me a bad dad?" David asked. Ian was quiet. "Then, no. Just a broken one." David gave a tired smile. "That makes 2 of us." They didn't speak after that. But they sat together until the storm passed. And in that silence, something finally cracked, not in pain, but in healing. The next morning, Ian ran into the room holding a drawing. It was the same house. The same blue door. But this time, the door was open and sunlight poured through. David didn't say a word. He just took the picture, framed it, and placed it above the fireplace. Right where family portraits should go. The last time David had laughed, truly laughed, was on a boat. It was Liam's 5th birthday. The boy had worn a life jacket 3 sizes too big, a chocolate smudge on his cheek, and the wind in his curls. He'd pointed at the sky and yelled, "Dad, even the clouds are smiling." And David, he missed it. He'd been on the phone. The memory came back to him now, not like a wound, but like a whisper. Because this time, laughter returned not on a boat, but in a kitchen. Ian was making pancakes. Sort of. Flour dusted the counter like snow. Kian was in a high chair banging a spoon. Safa sat on David's lap, clapping every time Ian flipped something resembling a circle. Noah waddled barefoot, holding a stuffed elephant like it was a crown. Ian was focused, tongue between his teeth, eyes determined. Then he looked up. "They're burning." David sniffed the air. "No, no. That's just rustic." Ian chuckled. "You mean ruined." David raised a finger. "It's called flavor layering." The baby laughed. The house felt alive. Redemption hadn't arrived in a single moment. It crept in, disguised as routine warm milk, shared glances, late-night stories under dim lamps. One night, while folding laundry, Ian looked up and said, "Do you miss him?" David didn't ask who. He just answered, "Every day." Ian nodded. "Sometimes I pretend I don't miss her. But I always do." David placed his shirt down. "Missing someone means you loved them the right way." Then Ian whispered, "I used to think God was punishing me for being too small to stop it." David froze. Turned. Kneeled. "No," he said firmly. "Listen to me, Ian. This world failed you. Not the other way around. You weren't too small. You were just a kid. And you were brave in ways no one should have to be." Ian's lip trembled. "But I didn't cry at her funeral. I was just numb." David took his hand. "You carried your whole family across the desert, barefoot. Sometimes love doesn't look like tears. Sometimes it looks like survival." The next day, Dr. Evelyn stopped by. She watched the way Ian poured cereal for the babies. The way he looked at David before answering questions. The way he stayed close, but no longer guarded. When they sat down for their weekly session, she said, "He's healing." David smiled softly. "So am I." But just as things settled, reality came knocking. Marcus called. "There's a custody hearing," he said. "Final decision. You'll need to make your case. It's not guaranteed." David's stomach twisted. Will they split them? If no guardian is approved, yes. David hung up the call and stared out the window. The blue door stood still. He'd have to fight. Not with lawyers. With truth. He began gathering everything: records, letters from the therapist, statements from nurses. He wrote a personal plea. Honest. Vulnerable. Then he sat down with Ian. "They'll ask you questions in court," he said. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready for." Ian looked down. What if they don't believe me? David hesitated. Then I'll still be here. No matter what. That night, David didn't sleep. He walked the hallway. Checked the babies 3 times. Stared at the drawing above the fireplace, the one with the open door and the sun. And he prayed. Not with words. Just with silence and hope. The morning of the hearing, David tied Ian's shoelaces, buttoned his small shirt, and brushed his hair back with care. You ready? He asked. Ian shrugged. As I'll ever be. They walked into the courtroom hand in hand. It wasn't grand. Just beige walls and tired eyes. But to David, it felt like standing at the edge of the world. The judge read through papers. The social worker testified. Dr. Evelyn spoke on emotional development. Then the judge looked at Ian. Would you like to say anything? David's heart pounded. Ian stood. Walked forward. He took a deep breath. And then he spoke. The room fell quiet. Even the rustling of papers stopped. Ian stood before the judge, shoulders straight, voice trembling just enough to show he was real, but not weak. If I say the wrong thing, do we get split? He asked. The judge looked at him kindly. You don't have to say anything at all. But whatever you do say, we'll listen. Ian swallowed, glanced back at David, then turned forward. He didn't read from a paper. He didn't memorize a speech. He just spoke. I carried them, he began, voice soft but sure. Not because I'm strong. I'm not. My legs hurt. My arms gave out. I was scared the whole time. But I carried them because they're my family. He paused. And he looked at David, eyes glossy. He carried me. A stillness filled the courtroom. Ian continued, he didn't try to make me forget my mom. He didn't try to be someone else. He just stayed. Every day. His fingers clenched. He didn't fix me. He didn't make the bad dreams stop. But he held Sappho when she cried. He warmed Kian's bottle at 2 a.m. He made burnt pancakes and read the same story 6 times. He turned fully to face the judge. If I ever had a dad, it was supposed to be him. A tear slid down David's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. The judge nodded. Thank you, Ian. After that, the room became a blur. Statements. Legalese. A gavel that struck not just wood, but years of guilt, loss, and waiting. Full legal guardianship is hereby granted to Mr. David Cole. And just like that, it was done. But for David, it wasn't about paperwork. It was about what came after. At home, the kids didn't understand what court meant. But they understood celebration. Balloons. Confetti from a hole-punched notebook. David made a cake from a box mix. It tilted to one side, lopsided like his whole life, but sweet anyway. Later that night, Ian came to him with a small gift box. Inside? A keychain. Shaped like a blue door. David blinked. You made this? Ian shrugged. I told Marcus you'd need something to carry with you. In case you forget where home is. David pulled him into a hug. The kind that says everything words can't. In the days that followed, the house transformed, not with paint or money, but with noise. Laughter. Spilled cereal. Toys underfoot. Arguments over bedtime and hugs that fixed them. David no longer wore suits. He wore spit up. He no longer scheduled his days by meetings. He scheduled them by nap times, teething cries, and school runs. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel empty. But healing doesn't erase the past. It folds it gently into the present. One evening, Ian sat on the porch beside him. The sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in soft amber. Ian asked, "Do you still think about him?" David nodded. "Every day." Ian held up his drawing pad. He'd drawn 2 houses side by side, both with blue doors. One had Liam's name in the window. "He's not gone," Ian said. "He just helped you find us." David looked down at him, eyes stinging. "You think so?" Ian nodded. "I know so." Inside, the babies cried. But this time, David didn't rush. He just smiled. "You want to help me?" Ian stood. "Always." As they stepped through the doorway, David glanced back at the setting sun. The blue door glowed softly in its light. And he realized he hadn't just found children to care for. He'd found a life worth living. Not as a CEO. Not as a man trying to outrun grief. But as a father. They say a house is just walls and a roof. But sometimes it becomes something else. A memory. A beginning. A second chance. Years pass like pages in a slow, quiet book. The seasons changed, but the laughter inside the house never stopped. It deepened, rippling through hardwood floors, echoing down hallways, threading into the soft creak of the rocking chair that David once sat in alone. Now, that chair was never empty. Noah climbed everything he could find. Safa named all the squirrels in the yard. Kian insisted on being carried even when he could walk. And Ian? He grew. Not just taller, but steadier, softer, stronger. He started helping Marcus Blake with volunteer work at the shelter, handing out blankets, reading to children who looked like ghosts wrapped in skin. He carried more than his share of the weight, but now, not because he had to. Because he chose to. One evening, David found a folded paper on his desk. Ian's handwriting had matured, but the heart behind it remained the same. It read, "You didn't come to save us. You came to be saved too." David read it once. Then again. And again. Until his hands trembled and he placed it gently in the drawer beside Liam's old photo. The past no longer haunted him. It sat beside him, quiet but at peace. On Ian's 14th birthday, David took him to the hardware store. "You're old enough now," he said, smiling. "For what?" "To help me repaint the door." They stood outside together, brushes in hand. Ian picked the same shade as always. Ocean blue with a streak of sky. As they painted, Kian and Safa ran barefoot through the grass. Noah pretended he was a superhero defending the backyard from invisible enemies. David turned to Ian, brush frozen mid-stroke. "I used to think fatherhood was about teaching." Ian glanced at him. "It's not?" David smiled. "No. It's about listening." Ian dipped his brush again. "Then you've been a great dad." And that was it. No fireworks. No orchestra. Just a quiet moment where 2 lives stitched together with pain finally settled into peace. That night, they lit candles not because the power was out, but because the kids loved pretending it was a campsite. David sat on the floor, Satha in his lap, Noah leaning against his shoulder, Kian fast asleep in a pile of blankets. Ian sat by the window, sketching something under the golden glow. Another blue door. Only this time it was open wide. No locks. No barriers. Just light. David leaned his head back, heart full in a way no achievement ever gave him. He didn't need applause. He didn't need a title. This was the legacy. Not a company. A family. A home. A second chance wrapped in messy routines and sticky handprints on glass. As the screen fades to black, Ian's voice, older now, calm and steady, whispers over soft piano notes. He didn't find us in the desert. We found each other. And every day since, we've walked home together. If this story touched your heart, stay with us. Subscribe for more stories that remind us, family isn't always blood, it's who shows up, stays, and loves anyway.